I did not expect the Democrats to be this big and this loud with this kind of enthusiasm. What did I miss about what you're seeing develop here?
I think the electricity. There's so much excitement. There's so much organizing power and potential. People really wanted to see a change in the ticket. People really wanted to see younger voters be enthusiastic. They wanted to see black, brown, voters of all different backgrounds and stripes come together, and we're seeing that here. I think that the energy in the room is wild, but that mirrors the energy that is out on the campaign trail. So people are upset that Kamala Harris, people in media are upset that Kamala Harris isn't sitting down with media right now, which she will shortly after this convention. However, the people on the ground know that this is what's electrifying. They know that this is a ticket that has America's interests at heart. And I think that her rolling out her economic agenda really helped a lot of people to understand where she is, where she's coming from, and that as we continue down this path, she's going to talk about, you know, her trajectory, how she got to where she is, but more importantly, how her story meets and matters yours. She is really connecting with the American people on a different level. And I think it's very Obama-esque in many ways, but she's still up against a lot. She's a woman of color. We know that those things are here, but she's fighting back hard.
Let me ask one Obama question, and then I want to ask a question where people may start throwing their glow bracelets at my face. But first, you know the Obama mystique in Chicago very well. What is his mission tonight? Because the House is here for the Obamas. This is about Michelle and Barack. Everybody's here for them tonight. What is his mission, and how does he have to thread the needle?
I think his mission is to reinvigorate people the way he did around 2008. Hope and change. He's going to talk about hope. He's going to talk about that vision that brought so many people to his ticket originally, that brought so many people around that conversation, but also the America that we're in versus the best of America that we could be. I think he's going to thread that needle. He's going to talk about the working class. He's going to talk about how our differences should not make us hateful of each other. And he's going to try to bring people together. I think we're going to see a very strong message of unity, which was the same thing that he ran on in 2008.
What does he do with Biden?
I think that he gives Biden his flowers. We saw on the first night that was essentially supposed to be Biden-Rama, for lack of a better term. We're going to see him talk about Biden and the legacy that Biden leaves, because he is a president who has the most achievement in the modern era. No one comes even close to that, with the exception of FDR. He's going to give him his flowers, but he's also going to continue to weave that needle around why it's important to stand by Kamala Harris.
So now to what I now know is true, okay? We now know the story of how Biden got pushed out. Everybody here is telling the story because they want to be on the right side of history now. So they're telling it. But it's only Mike Quigley from Illinois who was out and was really bold early on. And he's now a star at this convention, the congressman from Illinois that nobody knew because he came out first. So this is my understanding. There was a disconnect. People were getting polling that they were losing in swing districts. Forget about national numbers. That was always a distraction. And they knew it, and Biden's people knew it, but they were not acting on it, and they were not going to him with the information. And it eventually took a critical mass of people saying, somebody's got to go to Joe and tell him, because he doesn't see it the way it is. Is that your understanding of how it went down?
I think there was a belief that some of the polling was inaccurate for a very long time. And to your point, yes, national polls aren't necessarily helpful at all. You got to go with the swing state. You got to go with the local polling. However, there was also a belief that they could turn this around, that they had enough time, that they just had to reach more people, that they had to talk about his policies, they had to talk about infrastructure, they had to talk about jobs, they had to talk about what he's done in energy policy. They had to do these things, and they had to tell the story differently in order for people to latch on. What we saw was that just was not occurring, that way too many people were the double haters, as they call them. Way too many people thought that he was too old to keep it going. Irrespective of the wins, he was not able to fight against the challenges that be. And I think that at the final hour, it was honestly donors. Donors helped make that decision for Biden. And as somebody who was a longtime Biden supporter, love the man. I think he did an amazing job as president. It was hard to see, but the path to victory, the path forward to a competitive election was not going to be seen.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.